Apologies for my voice in advance. Uh, I don't know why it sounds that way. I blame my small nasal cavity. Okay, so Copics or most brand art pens have two ends. Oh, and by the way, my mic is terrible. So, and also the video quality of this is so-so. Okay, moving on. There is a chisel tip and a brush tip. The brush tip is the end that I use 90% of the time. The last step I use when creating an illustration is the light using white gel pen, pastel, and sometimes gold. The best pastel is the Prismacolor New Pastel, as it can layer nicely on top of the inks, and you can smooth it out with your finger or whatever, and it creates a nice blend. A few of the pens that, so by compatible, it means that they will not bleed. So some of them that I have here is the Pentel Sign pen, which has a very fine tip, but unfortunately is not refillable. The Copic brush pen, I think you can refill this, but you have to do it with a syringe or something like that, and I haven't. Then there's the Pentel Pocket Brush pen. This is refillable, and I find this the most reliable pen I've used. My only complaint is that the brush is too broad for fine detail. I really like the Kuretake brush pen, which is not shown here. It's more fine than the Pentel Pocket, but less so than the Sign pen. However, it is not bleed proof unless they've changed the formula. Ultimately, you need to make sure that the ink is India ink or waterproof ink, and then it'll be less likely to bleed. And so, as far as Copics, and there's not just the one brand of Copic. There's other types of markers on the market, and I find that they all work just as well. Touch and the Copics are refillable, and that's why I like them. I do most of my work on toned paper, so when the Copic dries on toned paper, whether it be gray or brown, it changes that tone, it changes the color. So to more accurately predict the color that I'm laying down, I created a reference sheet. I recommend this even if you're using white paper, so you're not wasting ink and time on a scrap piece of paper with every piece that you make testing out your colors. Copics won't bleed outside the lines so much as they'll bleed through the paper. So one of the things that I do in order to combat this is I put a scrap piece of paper, printer paper does good enough, and that keeps it from blotching up the next page. So I didn't choose the greatest colors for this blending part, but just to show as an example, blending is really easy. It's just about how much ink you soak into the paper and then you force it to bleed. So to me, Copics are similar to watercolor in that they can blend and they are fairly transparent. However, I'm impatient. The time it takes to basically master Copic markers or any markers for that matter is a fraction of that of watercolor. Watercolor to me is you can achieve more. You can achieve more in terms of style and realism and variety. But the advantages of Copics, just a couple of them, are they dry fast and it doesn't have any real special paper requirements. And that second one's huge for me because I don't particularly like watercolor paper. And I find Copics work pretty good on just about all paper. So you you can work it. You can use it on printer paper or heavy toned coffee paper. The thing about that though is if you use the heavy coffee paper, it soaks up a ton of ink, so it'll go through a lot more ink if you do that. So personally, I like Strathmore toned paper. Copics are similar to watercolor in how it reacts with itself. So the important thing to remember when you're doing blending is you get a much nicer gradient if you use similar shades or similar colors so you step it along, and that helps the blending process. I didn't really do that here, so don't do as I do, do as I say. So what you can see here is I'm using the Pentel Sign Pen, which I really liked. It has a really nice brush, but it doesn't have very good mileage. It ran out pretty quick, and I think I only did maybe a couple of illustrations, and I wasn't doing any blocking or anything like that, so it ran out real fast. So hopefully they can make something better, and if anybody has any idea of something similar to that, but is refillable, then just leave a comment or send me a message. What you can see here is, as I'm doing the sketch, the lines are really faint, and some people just do a really loose sketch and then they're able to see what they want to draw on top. I have to draw everything out, so I use a mechanical pencil to go in and do the details, and then I use a kneaded eraser to lift the lines to make them really faint. That way they don't show through when I go to erase the lines completely after inking. Just to change things up, I decided to color a different alien that I had drawn with not the Micron, but the Copic multiliner. And the way that I usually approach the color is sometimes I'll do a little thumbnail, but usually I go off of some sort of color key that I made off to the side. There, boring instructional video complete. If you stuck it through, thanks. And hopefully I can up my game in the future. I used a crummy video editing program, Shotcut. It was free. Maybe I'll use something better like InDesign in the future, but I didn't want to do the monthly fees on a first video. So there you go. Hope this helped. The rest of the video is me completing the illustration to some royalty-free music. Why can I not think of words when I'm doing this? Oh my god. Alright.